Say a parent is about to leave the house and they're leaving their child at home, and they tell their child the rules. They say you can do whatever you want. The TV remote's here, the food's in the pantry. But as soon as they're about to walk out the door, they say, "Oh, by the way, there's a loaded handgun under the kitchen sink. Don't touch it." And then they walk out. After the parents leave, about 2 hours later, the child remembers what the parents said. He starts messing with the gun, not knowing the danger, and kills himself. Would you consider, if this were a real-life situation and you were in court, would you consider the parent to be at fault or the unknown child?
Well, you can say both, but obviously the parent, depends on how old the kids are. How old are the kids?
6.
Well, why would you leave the kids anyway? Whether there's a handgun under there or not, right?
Now, would you agree that the parents, you would say that they were probably
sure.
The greatest
parents? And in order to do that, what we're doing is we're appealing to a moral standard and saying that they violated that moral standard.
Well, not necessarily. It just ends in the death of the child.
Why is the death of the child wrong if there's no moral standard?
I don't want to stretch it that far.
You have to, because that's where we're going with this. You see, if you're going to say that this is what God does for us and therefore God's immoral, you're appealing to a moral standard to say that God's immoral. Well, what is that moral standard?
If you don't take that caveat, though, and we just kind of use our common sense and our gut, wouldn't your gut say his parents are not the greatest parents? They could be better, they could have not.
Oh, yeah, but see, there's a difference between how you know something and that something exists.
But would you not agree, if that's a yes or no question, would you agree, yes, that the parents could have made a better choice, they are not the greatest parents?
Yes, but that implies there's a best. If the parents could make a better choice, that implies there's a best. So the question is, what is the best?
It doesn't necessarily imply there's a best, it just says it would have been better, it would have been more likely to not result in the death of the child if they had not told the child about the firearm under the kitchen sink.
Travis, if there's no best, there's no better or worse. You can't get away from an absolute standard if you're going to make moral judgments about particular actions. Either the parents were right or wrong based on a standard beyond them. If there's no standard beyond them, then what happened to the kid is no different than killing a roach. Okay?
I'm not sure I would agree. You talked about infinite regression last night. Technically, the firearm on a 10-foot stool would be better than a 5-foot stool, and if you go that way, it seems it would be best to have the weapon that could harm the child on an infinitely high stool, which doesn't exist. But now take this analogy.
But Travis, hold on. Don't go any further, because whenever you use the word better or worse, you're implying a standard. So the question is, on an atheistic worldview, what is that standard?
It's I'm not here to defend that claim. It's a practical standard.
There's no standard, whether you want to call it practical, divine, there's no objective standard unless God exists. Now, you're right about the fact that you know it without claiming God exists. Just like you can know what a book says and deny there's an author. But there would be no book to read unless there was an author. And this is what atheists do. They know what right and wrong is while denying there's a God. Well, you can know what right and wrong is and deny there's a God, but there would be no right and wrong unless there was a God. So every moral objection that's brought up against Christianity implies a standard that doesn't exist on an atheistic worldview. Now, a fair position for you would be to say, look, I believe God exists, but I believe the God of the Bible is not Him. That's a fair, you can say that. Then you have to give evidence, who is this other God then? Right? You can take that route. That's a logically defensible route. You can say, because I think the God of the Bible is immoral, and I think another God is the true God. Okay, fine. Give me the evidence for that God.
This doesn't even have to do with God. I'm not making a theistic or non-theistic claim.
All moral claims have to do with God. Otherwise, they're subjective.
If we weren't in this room and you weren't an apologist, most people would say, yes, that's a bad parents. They would agree that it's bad parenting advice to...
I agree it's bad parenting, but the reason I agree it's bad parenting is because I know what good parenting is. I know what the standard is.
We take the analogy and we replace the parents with God and the firearm with an apple. I assumed you knew it was going there.
Well, okay, let's suppose he did that, and then let's suppose that... Let's go back to your firearm. That the parent... Let's make sure the analogy is correct here. The parent says, don't touch the gun. and then leaves, and then the kid shoots himself and kills himself, the parent comes home and says, okay, no problem, I can resurrect you. That's the true analogy now. If you want to be resurrected, you can. If you don't, if you want to continue to shoot guns in your head, you can keep doing that. I'll let you do that. But if you truly want to be resurrected, I can do that. Do you want that?
I'm not sure that concept is useful to this analogy.
That's the analogy.
No, okay, it's
Because in your analogy, the parent is God, right? Well, if God exists, then He can resurrect the child who has sinned. And that's exactly the story of the Bible. He can redeem the bad choice of the child. That's what God does. That's the whole message of Christianity. You got it.